I have inveighed against this concept of Stalingrad on the Mediterranean. We cannot afford to waste our soldiers the way we have. And nobody listened. Nobody cared. These are the people right now who are responsible.
I will differ with you on one point. There are many people who care, many Israelis who care.
I'm talking about the people in the high command, the ones who on
the ones who are part of the cabal, part of the deep state.
Correct. No,
the ones who are working for foreign interests, they of course do not really care.
Right.
But a huge number of Israelis most certainly care. They would ask you, what can we do about it? How can we change this inane and extremely frustrating reality in which we find ourselves?
Bibi Netanyahu,
where a member of the war cabinet decides against the prime minister's wishes to go and talk to his handlers in the US. That itself is speaks volumes.
Bibi Netanyahu is an avid reader and analyst of polls. And I think one poll that might be persuasive is one that says, should we or should we not get rid of people like Chief of Staff Halevi, and who meet with a foreign secretary in an unauthorized way? Should we get rid of Benny Gantz and Eisenkot, who appear to be American agents? And the polling, the exact wording of the polling can be determined at some point. But this is the only thing that will convince Bibi Netanyahu to rid the government and the military of those responsible for October 7th and who are now undermining our ability to win the war. I am sorry. Benny Gantz can say everything he wants about how he feels that we should finish the war by eliminating Hamas. But by going on this trip, on this unauthorized trip to the United States, he is undermining in a most incredible way our country's ability to finish this war on terms that we could describe as victory. I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways. You can't undermine a government that's trying to win a war and at the same time say, well, I'm in favor of these objectives. They're contradictory.
You mentioned Netanyahu's penchant for polls, which is which is very well known. Not that other politicians are averse to polls, but he's particularly into polls. And if he were here, he might tell you that, well, I'm very concerned about Gantz because according to certain polls, many polls, if you believe them, he's ahead of me in the polls if elections were to take place tomorrow. Yeah. And I'm very worried and very concerned, and I have to tread very carefully because Gantz is extremely popular. I would tell him that he's wrong.
And you would be right. Because the most
I think Gantz's real world prospects in whenever the elections roll around, I would be surprised if he gets more than in the end than 11, 12 seats. And I'll tell you why I say that. Because I think there will be at least a number of new parties, at least two, probably more, of new parties before the next elections take place. And I think also this trip of Gantz is going to harm him in electoral terms, and I think that his shine is going to begin to wane. His star is going to wane.
When a poll was taken of the effect that Naftali Bennett would have, the results were interesting. It indicated that he would win 12 mandates, all of which would come from Benny Gantz's numbers right now. All of them. Every one of them. So you're right. I think that he's got kind of a Wizard of Oz um, characteristic right now, in the sense that when he talks, bombastically, and he talks strongly, but when you pull the curtain back, he's an intellectual and political dwarf. I mean, he's a default candidate, because when people ask, well, what does he stand for? They can't answer that. They cannot answer that.
He's the ultimate modern day Western politician, which means he can, depending on circumstances, stand for anything.
Correct. And stand for everything at the same time.
Exactly.
There was a character, oh God, being there in this movie. Chauncey, I can't remember his last name. I wish I remembered the movie now, but he was mentally defective, and he never said anything really, and everybody attributed to him great depth of intellect by his most either inane or non reaction to questions. He would just look serious. And I think his name was Chauncey Leake or something like that. He was a gardener, and his silence was interpreted to be, a sign of great intelligence on his part. So I think in this case, he plays that part. So right now we're in a very dangerous position, and it might be the most dangerous political and strategic position that we faced since 1948. If we give in and we do not finish the job, we are facing a crisis of monumental proportions. Our deterrence will be finished. The Americans will pile on at this point, as well as the Europeans, to order us to evacuate the Gaza Strip and to agree to a Palestinian state. This is where we're headed right now, unless Bibi Netanyahu snaps out of his funk and fires back at the United States clearly and decisively. You don't tell us what to do. And if you're going to threaten us with weapons, well, we've got something a little bit better than malfunctioning American bombs at our disposal.
At this
You
point,
said,
I would ask you again, which weapons systems would be affected by such an American embargo?
well, probably the most apparent ones would be are the Air Force. They're all American airplanes. We're reliant upon a supply chain from them that can be terminated within minutes. Could we get around that? Yes. We need an order basically to start using perhaps 3D additive technology to substitute
in order to produce spare parts.
To produce spare parts. Right. We can do that. As far as bombs are concerned, aerial bombs, we have the technical capabilities to replace every single aerial bomb that we are receiving from the United States. As far as precision guidance is concerned, almost all of the precision guidance fuses and warheads that we're using right now were developed here in Israel. But we allowed the Americans, they said, well, if you want us to use them or buy them, we have to produce them in the United States. So we just went along with that. We can produce all of them ourselves. We invented them. As far as artillery shells are concerned and mortar bombs, yes, we'll have to ramp up, but we are capable of producing them as well. Battle rifles, the same there. We can produce them ourselves. Tactical communications equipment, we have a stellar array of tactical communications gear that we can feed in slowly to replace any American gear we're using. surface-to-air missiles for ballistic missile defense. We have a line here, an assembly line for Iron Dome missiles, for David's Wand, the intermediate range ballistic missile, and for the Arrow system. It's just they've been sabotaged by an over-reliance on American production. And that's because of requirements under the appropriations that are made for Israel every year. So on all three systems, we can produce these missiles ourselves, but we have to phase them in. And I would argue that as far as ballistic missile defense is concerned, with Hezbollah in particular, there is one type of weapon, I won't mention it, but there is one type of weapon that we have at our command that could neutralize in one blow all of Hezbollah's missile systems, all of them. So when you ask, could we do it? The answer is yes, but it might take some time. And within that period of time, we have to use what we have most effectively. And if that means, for example, overrunning Egypt's barrier line in Gaza and evacuating the Gaza, so there's a place for them to go. It's not like we're pushing them out into the desert. And in that period of time, well, we have to reduce Rafah, we have to reduce Khan Yunis, and we have to reduce what's left of Gaza City up north to rubble. We can do that with what we have now. As far as Hezbollah is concerned, do we have the supplies to destroy them? The answer is a qualified yes. And I've actually written about one scenario that might very handily, with whatever supplies that we have right now, accomplish that end. With regard to Iran, do we have the weaponry at our disposal that could neutralize decisively their nuclear threat and ballistic missile threat to us? The answer, a qualified answer to that, is yes. Why is it qualified? Because it'll take a lot of heart. I'll put it that way. It'll take a lot of heart and a lot of yirat shamayim, fear of heaven, to actually go forward with a strike that hasn't been seen since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But you have to use the weapons at our disposal that are appropriate to the threat we face. So in general, and one last one, as far as the tank ammunition is concerned, we make fantastic main tank ammunition, 120 millimeter tank ammunition. It's amongst the best in the world. And again, we restricted production in order to make ourselves basically dependent on the United States. So to answer your questions in all of this, could we, if the Americans impose a arms embargo on us, would that affect our campaign against Hamas? The short answer is no. Would it affect our campaign, a possible campaign against Hezbollah? The short answer to that is no, it wouldn't. But there's an asterisk there. It depends on what we do with what we have. Or if the Americans impose an arms embargo on us, would it prevent us from eliminating the Iranian nuclear weapons threat to us? The answer is definitely no, it wouldn't. But all of these three scenarios require an Israeli government that can act decisively and without any fear at all of the Americans or anybody else. The only fear they have to have is of heaven. That's all. And I believe,
having said that, how do you believe Netanyahu and his state of mind and health we've discussed? How do you think he'll respond to the Biden administration, or the Biden, I should say?
The fact that I can't answer that is an answer. I'm very scared right now because of that. I don't know. If we had a prime minister worthy of the name, I would say right now we'll be okay. We'll be okay. We'll soldier on, and we'll accomplish our tasks and our missions. It wouldn't be pretty, but we'll win. But right now, I can't say that. We have as it was said as Jellicoe said at, oh my God, that the Royal Navy at one point, Admiral Jellicoe said that, we're fighting with a flawed cutlass. This is at Jutland. And I'm afraid right now we are fighting with a flawed cutlass in the sense of a government and a military high command that are not up to the task at hand. They just aren't. So unless the Poles support Bibi growing a spine, I am very concerned for the immediate future. Because if he buckles and he agrees to a ceasefire of unlimited duration and postpones the destruction of Hamas for even one day, I'm very concerned about our ability to survive going forward. That's how dangerous this is right now. Hamas cannot be allowed to survive. And I am sorry if that requires us losing our remaining hostages. Then somebody has to make that hard decision. Too much is at stake right now for us to allow the lives of the hostages to interfere with the survival of our country. They have, both Hamas and the left, and now the Americans, have weaponized our love and concern for our fellow Jews as a dagger poised at our throats. We mustn't flinch right now. We mustn't flinch. When David HaMelech went after his people, his family, his people, who were kidnapped by the Amalekites at Ziklag, I'm sure he understood the risks his action involved. And what those risks were was the slaughter of his family and his friends and his people. But with God's help, he emerged victorious. And that's what has to motivate and animate everything that we do with regard to the hostages. I have long...
And he proceeded. He did not just bring about the salvation of those hostages. Women, children, etc., have been left behind in the camp, who had been taken captive by the Amalekim. But he also dealt with the Amalekim in such a way that they didn't do that again for some reason.
No, they didn't. And this is the kind of
those that were left.
That were left. And this is what we need now. Look, the Arabs themselves have privately expressed the wish that we finish Hamas, not deal with them, not negotiate with them, not bargain with them, but finish them. This is what they say in private. And if we want to expand the Abraham Accords, and if we want to enhance our perceived credibility as an ally, then we have no choice but to eliminate Hamas at all costs and to eliminate Hezbollah at all costs. Do we have a government that will do that? If I were a betting man, I wouldn't bet. I wouldn't bet on it at all.